Welcome into episode 167 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
Apple hit with a slew of updates this week. Not surprisingly, there was a lot of security stuff to go around in those. Some front and center, some behind the scenes. What's new? What's fixed? What scares Augustrometer the most? Find out on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Updates for all of the things from Apple this week. For modern devices, the Cupertino company on Tuesday released iOS 13.3, iPadOS 13.3, because they are totally different. macOS 10.15.2, watchOS 6.1.1, tvOS 13.3, and version 13.3 of the software for HomePod. They also released updates for older devices, which we'll hit as we go. Now, this kind of felt security heavy, these updates. Not that it was all that. Mac Rumors lists some of the featured features of iOS 13.3 and its corresponding iPad update. Some of those include being able to pull Animoji and Memoji stickers out of the emoji keyboard. Editing a video in the Photos app will now let you create a new video out of the edit instead of just replacing the old one. There are tweaks to Apple News Plus. There are tweaks to the Stocks app. Then we get to the security stuff. There are some straight-up security features like adding support for NFC, USB, and Lightning FIDO2 compliant security keys in Safari. Now, we've talked about this one coming for a while, but remind people, and when I say people, I mean me, what are we talking about here?
Well, basically, FIDO2 is the sort of specification for the keys used within the WebAuthn protocol. And it allows you to use an authenticator, such as a USB device, that authenticates you to a website. Simpler devices just have a button to activate it, but more complex devices use biometric scanning, such as your fingerprint, to log you in. Only certain websites are set up for this right now, but it's becoming a lot more common, and it prevents you from having to remember all those strong, unique passwords that you're already using. And in this case, it seems like it's for Lightning devices as well as USB devices.
So what I find kind of confusing is this is operating system specific, but it's for a web browser. I mean, can you explain why you need a whole OS update to make that work?
Well, Safari is a browser, but WebKit, which Safari uses, is system-wide. So it's something that touches a lot of different components. It is part of the OS, essentially. In addition, Safari isn't really an app you can download from the App Store. And Apple generally does its updates as releases of a bunch of stuff, not just a single app.
The other straight-up security update sort of doesn't look like one at first. Communication limits for screen time is a new feature that's part convenient and part important. The piece from TechCrunch lays out how those limits work. For adults, you can set limits on who can contact you and when, allowing calls from just anyone versus only allowing calls from people in your contacts. Those settings are also configurable for downtime, so if you're sleeping, nobody can wake you, only friends can wake you, or just about anybody can wake you. You see, that's convenient, but where it shifts to important is when we're talking about kids. TechCrunch addresses communication limits for kids, saying if this is set up under Screen Time's parental controls, parents get to choose who can contact their children and when, and vice versa. During downtime, parents can also designate which particular contacts the child can message and call, like only mom or dad, for example. The feature does allow for emergencies as well. According to Mac Rumors, calls to emergency numbers are always allowed, and when placed, will turn off communication limits for 24 hours to make sure children are safe and not restricted from communicating with people in the event of an emergency. I don't want to sound like I'm knocking on Apple, but I know they've got a lot going on all the time. It's really surprising to me, though, that this has taken this long.
Feel free to knock Apple. While I trust them more than most companies, I still have a healthy skepticism, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And you're right, this is something that should have been baked into the original Screen Time release. It's great that they're adding it, and it's great they're mindful of children's safety. But yes, I too wish this was in there already.
Yeah, but it's there now. Barring an accident with the time machine, it's not going to be a problem anymore as long as what? People stay on top of their updates. Yes, I know, because you and I have worked together for a while. So there's another thing that Apple fixed, and Apple doesn't see this technically as a security vulnerability, though it does acknowledge the researcher who found it and fixed it. Another piece from TechCrunch says iOS 13.3 puts the kibosh on an AirDrop vulnerability. The guy who found it calls it AirDOS. What is AirDOS?
I'm going to say it's a sneaker invented by Michael Jordan.
That's fine with me. I kept saying AirDOS is what I kept thinking, which is also not right. But what is AirDOS?
AirDOS stands for Air Denial of Service. You can generally think of a denial of service as a flood of traffic that prevents a server or device from getting anything else done. Imagine if you got 10,000 people to show up at a Starbucks all at the same time and say, order pizza. Starbucks would be so busy dealing with all the weird, bogus orders that the people who showed up to actually get coffee wouldn't be able to get any. And that's sort of what a denial of service is. In this case, a bug in AirDrop was found by white hat researcher Kishan Bagaria. The bug allowed him to repeatedly send files to any iOS device within a range of the attacker. As TechCrunch explains it, when a file is received, iOS blocks the display until the file is accepted or rejected. But because iOS didn't limit the number of requests a device can accept, an attacker can just simply keep sending files again and again, repeatedly displaying the file accept box, which causes the device to get stuck in a loop. And Bagaria was able to send files not only to a single device, he could send files to any device set to accept AirDrop files that were within range. To avoid this, your best bet is to change your AirDrop settings so that you don't accept files from everyone. You can also turn off Bluetooth, but that would also shut off your shiny new AirPod Pros. Apple has publicly acknowledged Bagaria's findings with a security advisory, but you're right, they stopped short of calling it a vulnerability.
Let me ask you a question really quickly. When you say set up to accept files, you're not automatically accepting files, right? You're just accepting invitations. Or am I mistaken about that? Okay.
Correct. So
you can send me something, or put differently, you can try to send me something. And the thing is, if I don't know you from Adam, let me say it right. If I've got it set up so I can accept an invitation from everybody, I can get invitations from everybody, but it's not going to automatically download to my phone.
Right, but then they could jam up your phone like this researcher did.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. It's interesting to me that Apple doesn't see this as a vulnerability, well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, let's just stick with that, like just the invitation, not even me downloading a file. If I need to call a cop, but I can't because somebody's spamming my lock screen, that's bad. It's also kind of splitting hairs. Going to what you said a moment ago, 10,000 people going to Starbucks to order pizza. I guess technically that's something that would be a worry, but the chance of it happening is pretty slim.
Right. Technically, it's not a vulnerability any more than repeatedly calling you on your phone would also prevent you from calling the police in that scenario.
Except for the part where it was done. I don't remember if you mentioned this or not, but I know in one of the articles I read about it, he basically found like freeware or shareware or something. Maybe it was open source something. So he wasn't sitting there sending the file every time and waiting for people to accept it or decline it. He actually found something that would automate that process. So he didn't even have to do it. So like if you're calling me and I'm mad at you and I hang up and I want to call the cops, you can dial me pretty quickly, but I might be able to dial the cops faster. He had automated this whole thing so that, there's no getting out of it. Right.
And, it's technically not a bug. It's just the way things are set up to operate. He's just sort of taking advantage of that. Do I expect Apple to fix it? I'm sure they're going to take a look at it, but...
Well, no, they already have. Basically, they set a rate limit at this point. So, I mean, what he found was there was no rate limit on how many times you could send that. And now they've made it so you can only send it a certain number of times before it won't work anymore. I don't know exactly how the rate limit works, but I know that's in there. So
perfect.
Yeah, they fixed it, because no way they're going to acknowledge him if they don't have a fix for it yet. Like, hey, this guy told us about this thing, and boy, I hope that doesn't, mess anybody up. I'm curious, aside from AirDOS, as Bagaria calls it, is there a danger to leaving AirDrop open, like just, for everybody?
Well, if you automatically accept files from people without knowing what those files are, the files themselves could be an issue. So if, an invitation to accept file comes up and you said, sure, and that happens to, they could send you anything from text to a movie. And if they send you a compromising image and then turn around and call the police saying they saw a photo on your phone, that can be a problem, even though you didn't put that photo on your phone knowingly. They could also send you links to sketchy websites, and then you click on those to see what they are, and you try and log in, and now all of a sudden you've given away personal information.
Again, though, it depends on you accepting it and then you acting
Correct.
on it. I mean, you've got to be, like, if you get something from somebody you don't know, well, don't click on it, don't download it, don't accept it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the most basic thing. I mean, we go back now from, hey, this guy found this thing that's borderline vulnerability, to just the usual best practices of, doctor, it hurts when I click that. Don't click that. So all of that may seem like privacy and security reasons enough to update. There are the straight up security fixes. And then, like I said before, there are also the behind the scenes or under the hood security fixes. 13 of them, if my counting is correct. Now, I said earlier that we're going to find out what scares Mr. Trometer the most. Of course, this man knows no fear. But every time there are updates, I say to him, hey, do me a favor, go through the list of, updates, security updates. Find the one that you think would freak people out the most and then tell them about it, because I know you and you want people to update their software. August, please tell me what in the iOS updates on the security side scares you the most.
Well, anytime I see the word kernel in the security release notes, that scares the bejeebus out of me, because the kernel is essentially the core of the OS. And these bugs could allow arbitrary code execution, meaning that a malicious app could inject code to get personal data, install keyloggers, so much more nasty stuff. And there were several of them in this release, and they were all fixed by better memory handling. So splat go those bugs.
Now, I did say at the top that Apple has released updates for older iThings as well. If you're using an iPhone that can't make the jump to iOS 13 or an iPad that can't cope with its own operating system, Apple's security site points people to iOS 12.4.4. One security fix in this one, dedicated to FaceTime. It's applicable and should be applied to iPhone 6s and later, iPad Air 2 and later, iPad Mini 4 and later, and iPod Touch 7th generation. Now we move on to the Mac side of things. Mac Rumors says there are no major new features in Catalina 10.15.2. Apple touts changes to Apple News Plus and Stories and Stocks, similar to the iOS and iPad updates. The piece says the update also includes music bug fixes, adds support for using an iPhone to remotely control the music and TV apps on a Mac, includes photos and mail bug fixes, and more. For example, a separate piece from Mac Rumors says early reports suggest the update may fix the 16-inch MacBook Pro popping bug that's been bugging some people. Now, if none of that is reason enough for you to update, what about the 13 or so security issues addressed in this one as well? Pick your scare tactic, Mr. Trometer.
Well, I already mentioned the kernel, so in this case, I'll pick FaceTime because it seems to have affected every single iOS and other OS versions, including Catalina. And this bug also allowed arbitrary code execution by processing malicious video. I'm not really quite sure how that works. But as FaceTime has grown in popularity, bugs like this become a lot more important to squash.
Okay, you say, but I'm not running Catalina on my Mac. Well, Apple hasn't forgotten about you. The company's security site has Security Update 2019-002 Mojave and Security Update 2019-007 High Sierra, hitting at least some of the same issues. So have at it and be safe. Watches, TVs, HomePods. There are still more updates to hit. We will do that in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Macs. They're everywhere. Am I right? More people using Macs means more personal information. Medical information, financial information. More of our lives flowing through the Mac. You know it. I know it. And bad guys know it too, making each Mac a tempting target. Protect your Mac with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Surf more securely with MacScan 3. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. Let's quickly hit the rest of Apple's updates, and here's some scary stories from our man August. To the wrist we go, where we find watchOS 6.1.1 hitching a ride. MacRumors says it spotted no significant changes when it was running the beta. Apple seems to support that finding, saying simply that the release provides important security updates and is recommended for all users. The Apple security page pegs that number at 9 fixes. For those of you keeping score at home, Mr. Drometer, please do me a favor. Freak me out.
You mean my watch isn't even safe?
I know.
I'm going to go with WebKit on this one, since a lot of text message web links get sent and you can see the summary on your watch. You tap that link and it opens up that link in a small summary. The bug affects all watches all the way back to Series 1. And like the other nasty stuff, allowed arbitrary code execution on your watch. Memory handling is the culprit again, and Apple says that bug is now dead.
Now, similar to the OS update for older iThings, Apple released watchOS 5.3.4 on Tuesday. It's actually very similar to the aforementioned update. Apple's security page says this one also addresses a single FaceTime vulnerability. It's meant for Apple Watch Series 1 through 3, as well as for Apple Watch Series 4 when paired to an iOS 12 device. You talked about this a moment ago, but let's revisit really quickly, because this one has turned up all over the place. What's the deal with this particular FaceTime vulnerability?
So apparently malicious video sent via FaceTime could let a hacker execute code they shouldn't be able to. And like I said earlier, I'm not really sure how all this works, but it's really scary since you assume FaceTime is pretty safe. I mean, you're talking to the person that, called you, and you'd think that malicious video wouldn't be a problem there. But out on the streets every day, I see more and more people using FaceTime. So I'm glad Apple acknowledged this bug and took care of it.
My money's on Snow Crash. That's such a weird. Anybody else who's laughing, by the way, I know. Anybody else who's laughing, you just gained 5 geek points.
Let's all go to the Black Sun.
Nice. Not a lot new in tvOS 13.3, which is the other one, or one of the ones that we're going to hit now. Though if you use the Apple TV app, there is one welcome change. MacRumor says the update brings a new setting that'll let users change the banner at the top of the Apple TV app from what to watch to up next. Basically, that means stuff that you're already watching and actually care about will take the place of stuff you don't care about but is being suggested by Apple. 9 vulnerabilities laid waste with this update, according to Apple's security site. I'm scared, August. Do me a favor. Tell me why.
First my phone, then my laptop, then my watch, and now my TV. I think I'm going to go hide in the basement with an Etch-a-Sketch.
Sounds like a plan.
You know, a lot of the Apple TV bugs are the same as what we've talked about. So I'll pick the IOUSB device family bug, which could potentially allow an attacker to use USB to execute arbitrary code. Now, they would need access to your Apple TV, so it's not as bad as, say, some of the other ones. And it, too, was solved by better memory handling. And it sounds like maybe memory handling in all devices should be reviewed by Apple.
Last, and let's face it, probably least, Apple on Tuesday released version 13.3 of the HomePod software. I know the 50 to 75 people who have them absolutely love them. But let's be honest, it's not the one that's going to affect the most people. Once more to MacRumor as we go, which says the update improves the ability of HomePod to recognize the voice profile of family members. It allows individual family members to enable or disable personal requests, and it fixes an issue that could prevent music playback from resuming on a stereo pair following a call. There is nothing on Apple's security page about vulnerabilities addressed in the HomePod software update. But those seem to come in tandem with the iOS update, so I'm guessing any security fixes are folded into that.
If there were security issues with HomePod, I'm sure it'd be listed on Apple's security page. They've become really good about being transparent about security issues. And I've mentioned this before, but they even credit the person who discovered the bug if it was discovered outside of Apple. And for that, they receive a ton of my applause. In this case, it doesn't seem like there are any security issues for the HomePod, and that means I can still listen to my music.
HomePod users, by the way, don't have to do anything to get the latest software except update to the latest version of iOS. If you want to double check, though, or if you want to go ahead and, sort of push your HomePod along, you can go to Apple's Home app and either make sure the update has taken or, as I say, urge it to do the update thing. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes not only for this show, but for the last show we did, the one before that, all the way back to the very first one, and then any other shows that we do after. Oh, and you can actually listen to all of those shows right there as well. It's like those read-along books you had when you were a teeny tiny kid. You can listen and you can read along. And oh, what a time you'll have at securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.